Good day, everyone out there in the Twitterverse, the universe, online. This is a live stream video show called The Health In, an affiliate program of Homeopathy World Community, where we are creating waves of awareness. We are enlightening people who tune in to these shows with the experts that we have. I want to thank Amnon, our producer. He is juggling all the many faceted things that we have going on for you today, surprises. We have a special honorary guest, Dr. Robert Bruck, Alumni Distinguished Professor of Plant Pathology, Forestry, Environmental Science, and Environmental Technology and Management at North Carolina State University. He is a sought-after advisor of hundreds, I don't know, is it thousands of students over the period of 33 years? And thousands who love you and report back from you from all points on the globe when they do field work and go to the Peace Corps and do all sorts of things based upon your recommendation. So you have been teaching, Dr. Bruck has been teaching and doing research at NC State University for 33 years. He is an expert in the field of global warming, plant pathology, and forestry, and has testified before Congress numerous times in defense of the United States and our air quality. His research on air pollution on forest ecosystems and his lifelong career culminated with him being named the 1997 laureate of the North Carolina Award for Science by the governor. He developed the Department of Environmental Technology at the university and presently teaches environmental science classes to over 3,000 NC State students every year. And he instills in his students critical thinking. He has very high expectations for them, and he stays current. He has never given the same class twice. There's always something new, provocative, practical. He gives a rapid-paced class with lots of humor to keep them on their toes. He takes students every year on field trips to South America to actually get their hands on different parts of the world and widen their scope of knowledge about different cultures. He has investigated air pollution. The Lancet in 2009. I'm reading your part. Instead of that, I'll let you do that quote. Instead, we are in the beginning of Dr. Sharma is with us too. We're going to introduce him. We're so pleased that he's tuned in to the show from New Delhi. This is really an international program. Hi.
Good morning, Dr. Sharma. This is Bob Bruck.
And I love to hear you again in the show. And I hope we all learn about the dangerous things in the world by the politicians.
Okay.
Well, yeah.
Glad to be here.
Yes.
So instead of a quote, I'm not going to start with a quote. I'm going to start with just something that I've been thinking about. And that is right now we're in the beginning days of the Festival of Lights of Hanukkah. And this is about lighting a miracle of lights, that there's only one cruse of pure oil, which is related to our holy spark, our soul, which is pure. And with this light, we can light up the world. And also, I think about oil as this precious commodity and how we need to look at other resources using the light of within us to find other lights that are unlimited light, like the sun. And instead of tearing up our earth and using a limited resource, which has a lot of controversial conflicts related to it, power and money and greed and all of the negative effects. So I think that during this time, the shortest time of the year in the winter months, let's think about bringing some of our own light into the world. And so,
okay.
All right. So now we're going to listen to the expert.
All right. Let's get started on a subject that is near and dear to me.
Yeah, we want. Okay.
And let's sort of lay the ground rules first as to how we talk about what's happening.
Can I make one mention? I'm
Sure.
so sorry to interrupt. We do have a short movie, so
Okay.
whenever you
Well,
want.
let me start, and then you'll show your short movie. Okay. Okay. I'm going to go for about a couple of minutes. The way I like to describe this subject, the first paper I published on global climate change was in 1984. People sort of think that this is a new subject, that this is something that just came on the forefront. Maybe Al Gore invented it or something like that. The reality is that we have understood the chemical and physical attributes of our atmosphere and how it works since a paper published in France in 1833 by a fellow named Arrhenius. The fact is that we live in a world that has a sealed atmosphere. Nothing gets in and nothing gets out. Okay, I could start referring to the first and second principles of thermodynamics, okay, but it's not worth doing. The fact is that we have this envelope of air that surrounds us about 22 miles deep. What we put into that air is going to determine what happens to our atmosphere, ultimately what happens to the climate of our planet. What we do right now, we're living in a remarkable time, literally. This past summer was a milestone in the history of the science of global warming. The news, unfortunately, is not good, which then brings me to my next quote. And I often use this in class. And that is that denial is no river in Africa. And we are all in denial. Okay, we are all guilty. Our lifestyle, the things that we do, the things that we don't even think about are more of the problem than they are the solution. So let's talk about a little of the science behind what's going on. As I just stated, the atmosphere is a sealed system. The air is composed of approximately 79% nitrogen, 20% oxygen, and 1% everything else. And it's that 1% of everything else that is the key to understanding this. And that's counterintuitive all by itself. If you've got 100%, how could 1% affect what is going on? And I can tell you now that it is no longer a matter of, well, I agree, I disagree, I don't think it really is that way. Rush Limbaugh didn't say so. That's done. We are finished with that. 99.99% of every reputable climate scientist in the world is going to testify to the following. Number one, we are in a period of unprecedented global climate change, aka warming. And number two, there is a 99.9% chance that it is forced by anthropogenic stress, meaning us, man-made pollution. So how does it work? What we're concerned about primarily is carbon dioxide. Carbon dioxide is something you're breathing out right now. That's irrelevant. That doesn't compromise a 10,000th of 1% of the problem. Let's talk about what's going on. We have data now. Okay, this is peer-reviewed data, thousands of publications on it from a remarkable series of experiments. And that's the Vostok ice core in Antarctica. What God has done has left us a time vault. Okay, the work is being done primarily at NCAR, the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado, and we now have ice core data dating back over 2 million years. I could tell you the exact composition of the atmosphere and the temperature of the planet to within 1/100th of a degree Celsius based on the data from that time vault that is left in these glaciers. Every year, another layer of glacier is laid down by the snow. It traps gas, including air from the ambient environment. That includes carbon dioxide and everything else. So let's review that data very quickly. It's very simple. I consider it to be some of the most simple and elegant of all data surrounding this topic. We know that the Earth gets warm and it gets cold. This is not new data. The cycle of glacial and interglacial change on our planet, okay, due to something called the Milankovitch cycle, is approximately 150,000 years. And we see that. We actually see that signature in the glacier. Every 150,000 years, it recycles from cold to hot to cold to hot. So what does this mean? We know that during the coldest period, which was only 18,000 years ago, remember, the cycle's 150,000 years. 18,000 years ago, we were in the depth of the last ice age. The Laurentian Shield came all the way to southern Pennsylvania, covered in ice miles deep. We are now in what's called the interglacial. We're only at the beginning of the interglacial. So let's talk about that carbon dioxide. And we have these cycles going back 2 million years on a 150,000 year cycle, to remind you. Basically, when we are in a period of glacial freezing on the planet, the carbon dioxide concentration is about 178 parts per million. 178 parts per million. Well, let's remember that, okay? Basically, during the peak of the interglacial, meaning the warmest time on that 150-year cycle, the highest it has ever been, the highest in 2 million years, is 300 parts per million. And that makes sense, because when you have the natural planet, let's get man out of the picture right now, when you have warm temperatures, it means there's going to be more decomposition of organic matter. That's going to give off carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide is a thickener of the atmosphere. It's called a positive feedback loop. And that thickening of the atmosphere makes it more difficult for all the heat absorbed by the planet during the day to radiate back out into space. Hence, it gets warmer. As carbon dioxide goes up, the warmer it gets. So, let's say it again. 300 is the highest it has ever been in over 2 million years. What is it right now? Everywhere on the planet, look out your window, as of yesterday, 403 parts per million. Basically, since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, carbon dioxide in our planet is going up at 2% per year. Every single year, no end in sight. It doesn't flatten out. It doesn't go down. It goes up 1.8 to 2% per year. Why? The answer is simple. And again, no longer a point of contention. Zero contention. You want to fight this thing, basically do not pass go, do not collect $200. You are living on a different planet, okay? Basically, anyone who denies what is going on right now is either an idiot or a fool. That's where it comes from. It comes from 75 gigatons of carbon dioxide emitted by fossil fuel burning every single year, and that number is going up. Here's a better number, published in the New York Times this past weekend. Carbon dioxide is being emitted by human beings burning coal, oil, and gas at a rate of 2,500 pounds per second.
How many?
2,500 pounds per second.
Per second.
Okay, per second. Every second of every minute of every hour of every day. That carbon dioxide, you're listening, has a retention in the atmosphere of 120 years. In other words, you fire up your car, you burn a gallon of gasoline, all of that CO2 that you put in the atmosphere is going to be in this atmosphere globally. It's a global pollutant for up to 100, 110, 120 years. The only way that it is mitigated is by being absorbed by your friend and mine, green plants. So let me continue a little bit longer, and then we'll have the movie, okay? Green plants. Green plants are made out of carbon dioxide. How about that? Look at this thing that God gave us, okay? We put it out, we breathe it out, all animals breathe it out. Decomposition of our bodies turns into CO2, and then every green plant on the planet absorbs it. So now we say, wow, green plants are our friends, but now we have a problem. The Amazonian rainforest is being cut down at a rate of 2.3 acres per second. The rainforests of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Southeast Asia are being cut down at a rate of 3 acres per second. By taking the trees and removing them from our planet, we are adding another feedback loop in which we are getting higher carbon dioxide concentrations. They are not being absorbed by green plants. Finally, and this came out this weekend, okay, let's get some numbers from NCAR and what was published in the New York Times. Here it is. Listen carefully. Right now, the emissions of carbon dioxide on our planet by man are the highest they have ever been. Number two, this year will be the warmest year globally in 2 million years. Warmest ever. Number three, the Arctic ice pack as of August 25th was dissolved. There is no Arctic ice pack anymore. It melted. You could take a canoe to the North Pole and look around and you will see ocean around you. Next, the tundra and the taiga, that's the frozen permafrost of the north, is melting at such a high rate that all of the organic matter buried under it back from the Carboniferous 700 million years ago is now decomposing, giving off something even worse than carbon dioxide, methane. CH3 methane gas, which is 47 times more powerful a greenhouse gas as is CO2. Everything I just told you is unprecedented. It is driving the global climate scientists insane. We predicted all of this. Decades ago, we predicted all of this. We predicted it for the year 2070, 2090, 2100, and here in 2012, it is coming to fruition. Okay, nearly a century before what we predicted. On the present track, by time people born today are 60 or 70 years old, we will be looking at a carbon dioxide and methane concentration in our atmosphere 10 times higher than ever recorded on the planet before. Unprecedented. There's a word for this. Back to our friends, denial. We're on the highway to hell. Okay? Every climate scientist in the world knows it. We're afraid to talk about it because no one wants to believe it. Okay? The superstorm up in New York seems to have turned people's minds around. Right now in Doha, Qatar, we have the 5th International Global Climate Change Conference taking place, in which every nation in the world, except for the United States, wants to sign a massive treaty to cut back on carbon dioxide emissions. Our government says, well, that would be bad for our economy. We like coal. We have a 300-year supply of coal. Naturally, how do you expect the Chinese, the Indians, and others with their booming economies to listen to that and say, well, if the United States isn't going to do anything, we're not going to do anything. So that sets the stage. If you want, Debbie, what you could do is show your film right now.
Okay.
Then what I want to concentrate on is human health. That's what this talk is supposed to be about. What does this all mean to human health?
Excellent. Okay, everybody, if you have some questions, we will take them after. This message out from Australia, and many scientists and researchers have organizations that you can participate and learn from, just like our Thursday show on Blog Talk Radio with Alan Phillips and the issue of vaccinations. It's all legislation. It's all what we make our decisions politically that will affect us on the ground. So, right. Dr. Bruck.
Okay. Well, let's talk about some things that are of very, very great importance. Back to the issue again, that very often we don't consider there to be a problem until it affects us personally. It's interesting how, you take our good friends up in New York and New Jersey who just got, I couldn't believe it. There are 385,000 homes that were destroyed. You can't even conceive of 385,000 homes. These people understand what this supercane really, coming up through the warmest ocean temperatures ever recorded, gaining strength, Hurricane Sandy, as it moved north, rather than losing. That's totally counterintuitive in terms of what goes on. with tropical cyclones, and this is what they now ended up with. So basically, one of the things that is of great importance, and again, I want to reiterate something. I can recall right now, back in about 1984, I attended a workshop over at UNC Chapel Hill, where we have our medical school here in North Carolina, and the topic was global climate change and human health. And back then, it was almost like a joke, like, oh my goodness, that's not really going to happen, or maybe it'll happen. And we had experts from all over the world in there talking about what could happen, what's scary, maybe I'm getting old, but what could happen and what was a matter of complete theory back then in 84 has turned into abject reality right now. And unfortunately, in terms of the trends that we're looking at, we ain't seen nothing yet. And I'm not saying that as a scare tactic. I'm saying that as reality. If you think we've seen the worst, or that it's going to somehow, this is as bad as it's going to get, that, again, is simply foolishness to believe it. So let's talk about what these things can mean. Human health, Kay, is very much a part of our environment. We all know that. Our environment not only includes the temperature, the climate, the humidity that we live in, but also all of the other organisms that we live with. That goes from food organisms up to pathogens that infect us and can make, of course, our lives miserable, leading all the way to mortality. So basically, let's talk about some of the simplest things first, and it's almost funny when you read the recent papers that come out. Let's talk about a potential good effect. I love this term, a potential good effect of global climate change. If you live in a very cold region, one of the good effects is the fact that it's going to be warmer outside. And we already know that all over the world, basically in areas that have experience. I mean, we don't even know what winter is here in North Carolina anymore today, and we talk about weather. We're not talking about climate now. It's going to be 74 degrees here in Raleigh, North Carolina, fully 23 degrees above normal for this time of year. That doesn't mean anything. I'm not saying that's global climate change. But one of the things that people are using in the scientific community right now is instead of the words global warming, we use the words global weirding. And that is probably a better term because everything is crazy. We're having droughts where we should have floods. We're having floods where we should have droughts. Basically, the Philippines has been hit by 4 massive tropical cyclones in an area where they usually move much further north. It's weird. It's simply weird. But in terms of human deaths from freezing, we could probably anticipate that we are going to have far fewer people dying from freezing to death as we did 10 years ago or 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. That's pretty much the end of the good news, okay, when it comes to what global climate can mean directly to human health regarding hypo or hyperthermia. The rest of it is not good news because obviously the opposite side of that equation is that we have already experienced and will continue to have heat waves of an unprecedented sort. And I'm not talking about drought. That's a whole separate issue that we'll get to in a minute. I'm talking about simply heat, particularly young people and elderly people whose systems have a hard time adjusting to homeostasis will find themselves exposed to great heat. And again, I'm going to talk about Raleigh, North Carolina. This past summer, we had 16 days above 100 degrees Fahrenheit. We had 66 days above 90 degrees Fahrenheit. Those are all records, okay? We have never, ever had temperatures like that before. Naturally, if you live in Raleigh and you have a good income and you live inside and you have air conditioning and you have an air-conditioned car and an air-conditioned office, it doesn't matter that much. Let's not forget, however, that the entire developed world, what we call the Western world, comprises approximately 18% of the human population. The entire population of the United States is only 4.3% of the human population. Other places, there is no air conditioning. And when you have extended temperatures well above 100 degrees Fahrenheit, you end up having heat stroke, you end up with greater mortality. That's a direct cause of, again, heat-related or temperature-related death. Moving on, let's talk about, again, the abiotic things. Basically, the more, if you wanted to capsulize all of meteorology, we're talking about, whether it's wet, dry, hot, cold, windy, still, tornado, no tornado, hurricane, no hurricane, it all relates back to a very simple thing. I joke with my meteorology friends all the time. All it is heat. Transfer of heat. Everything you see when it comes to the climate, when it comes to weather, there's clouds in the sky, there isn't clouds in the sky, it's hot, it's cold, it's windy, it's still, is thermodynamics, the transfer of heat. The warmer it gets on our planet, due to heat being retained by that thickening atmosphere filled with carbon dioxide and methane, heat must dissipate. It must go somewhere. It's the second law of thermodynamics, elucidated by Isaac Newton in 1663. It's called entropy. Heat is going to move from an area of high concentration to an area of low concentration. That's all fancy terms for extreme weather. The incidence of extreme weather on planet Earth in the past 10 years has gone up by 1.5 orders of magnitude. We have more tornadoes, more hurricanes, more extreme flooding, like what's taking place up in the Pacific Northwest right now, more extreme droughts, like what's taking place in the Sahel of sub-Saharan Africa right now. 44 million people on the verge of starvation, okay? This, again, is the direct physical ramification, not biological, but physical ramification of the distribution of heat, okay? A hurricane is simply God blowing off steam from the ocean. That's all a hurricane is. The temperature builds up, builds up, builds up. The heat has to go somewhere. It goes and rises in a cyclonic manner up high into the atmosphere. It spins around until it dissipates itself. We understand the dynamics of it. We understand why it happens. But bottom line, the more heat, the more frequent and the more severe you will have all of these extreme weather events on our planet. Storms, floods, droughts, etc. This is part of, again, what's happening. And we have now a double feedback because, as I mentioned before, this is probably the hottest news in the global climate change field, and very, very few people know about it. Remember I talked about that vast area called the tundra and the taiga up in Canada, up in northern Europe, and across Siberia, up into Mongolia, and all the way, literally, all the way to the Pacific Ocean. These are hundreds of millions of square miles of ice. Underneath that ice are billions of tons of organic matter that were left behind 700 million years ago. As that organic matter now is exposed to air due to the melting ice, it is going to rot, like all organic matter rots, and it's going to give off methane. That methane is now probably the ace. It's the ace of spades that no one really ever counted on, that has now been thrown out on the table, and no one has a trump card to be able to beat it, because it is going to exacerbate and accelerate the thickening of our atmosphere, which is going to cause more heat retention and far more of this, quote, extreme weather.
Can I throw in
Yes.
volcanoes? Can I throw in
volcanoes have nothing to do with it.
They have nothing to do with it. What about
nothing to do with it.
What about fracking and unearthing all of the
fracking and all these things that are both releasing organocarbons into our atmosphere.
We're adding more.
Getting them to burn. That's why we're fracking. We want gas to burn instead of looking to solar and wind and geothermal and tidal, and the list goes on and on and on, alternative energy. Basically, the paradigm of America is drill, baby, drill, so that we can have more fossil fuel emitting more carbon into our atmosphere, which leads to my next point, Now we're back. Now we're going to move into the human-related area of this equation.
Anybody have a question? Should we find out if anybody has a question?
Yeah, if anybody has a question, that's fine.
What do we have? Something on the... You can call in to 919-518-9773 or on Skype at Computers2K Voice. We have bunches of people in the chat here today talking it up. We were kind of playing around with the idea of the metaphor of the human being and the life cycle of the human being and how the body functions as well as how the earth functions. And we need to be able to perspire. We do emit gas in many forms.
We'll talk about that.
Okay. I just want to let you know we have a quarter of an hour to go, and
all right.
if you want slides, let us know.
Okay, let's move on with human effects. Okay, the next one is the warmer our atmosphere gets, the more air pollution it is going to harbor. Okay, we're not talking about carbon dioxide. We're not talking about methane. We're talking about the baddies. We're talking about sulfur oxide, nitrogen oxide, ozone, peroxyacetyl nitrate.
Do we have a slide on that?
These are the things that give us asthma, bronchitis, emphysema, and cancer. The warmer the atmosphere gets, the greater the amount of air pollution we are going to have to deal with. Okay? Next, something, again, we don't think about in the United States at all. Food and potable water. Basically, our crops have either evolved and or been manipulated now since the beginning of agriculture 7,000 years ago to survive in the climates that we are familiar with. Right now, the predictions are that the breadbasket of America, the Midwestern United States, is going to turn into a desert, a dust bowl over the next 100 years, and the shifting of the area for corn, wheat, barley, rye, and oats will move north into Canada, where right now they have good soil, but it's much too cold to grow those crops there. This has tremendous social and political ramifications for example, the United States. Moving on. Diseases, something, again, we don't think about. As you mentioned earlier, every year for the past 23 years, I've taken a group of students to the Amazon, to the rainforests of Nicaragua, Belize, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Brazil. And what do we have to do? We have to get, quote, pills for malaria. We have to have netting for mosquitoes and dengue fever. Many people take vaccinations for yellow fever and cholera and all of these tropical diseases, again, mostly vector diseases. The mosquito is the bane of the existence of man. Right now, we have latent malaria, dengue, and yellow fever that is in southern Florida and along the Gulf Coast and southern Texas. Something we never, ever had to deal with before. As it gets warmer, as these viruses, as these plasmodium, that's a type of parasite, And as the Anopheles mosquito moves north, okay, something in India, we have Dr. Sharma on there. These are diseases that are endemic to the tropical parts. They had a huge dengue hemorrhagic fever outbreak recently. That's going to move north. It's going to move into Delhi. It's going to move up towards Kashmir, because as it gets warmer, the life cycle of these parasites and vectors is going to change. Now, this is not hypothesized. This has been proven already. We are now having disease outbreaks in places never, ever before seen. Here, we think about malaria as a third world disease. All those poor people down there that are too stupid to take care of themselves. We are now going to have tens of millions of people that are going to be susceptible to getting malaria in the United States. And guess what? There is no prevention of malaria, and there is no cure of malaria.
Well,
this is grim.
Don't forget to throw in a little homeopathy in there, and
yes.
I mean, it's not going to cure. If the climate and the weather doesn't improve, and if the mosquitoes are getting more virulent with the diseases, then we're going to be in an unending loop of disease. But
that's correct.
But homeopathy is still there, but we need to clean up the environment. That's the only solution.
Well, I'm glad homeopathy is there, because something better be there. Because right now, things like dengue and malaria, which combine affect over 500 million people a year, there's no prevention or cure. And right now, allopathic medicine has done virtually nothing. When we go down to these regions, we cover ourselves with toxic mosquito repellent, like DEET, which is carcinogenic, which is not something you really want to do. But nevertheless, look at the situation we find ourselves in. Again, I want to emphasize, these are problems that people in the third world, in the developing world, have dealt with since the beginning of time. We, in the industrialized countries, haven't even thought about it, and it's knocking on our door right now.
Correct.
Okay, look at what happened this past summer with corn. With corn, our harvest was down 48% in the United States.
What about ethanol?
What is that? Well, that's right. Of the corn that we harvested, 44% of it went to ethanol to put in the tanks of our cars. What does that mean for us? It means that the price of our food is going to go up 10, 12, 14%. You know what that's called? That is called an inconvenience. We'll bitch, we'll moan, we'll say, oh, I can't believe the price of this and the price of that. Do you know what it means to another 3 billion people on our planet? It means starvation. It means no access to grain that we either gave or sold because we don't have enough to feed ourselves. Very important. Now we're going to get to something controversial. When you think of corn, that's our number one crop in the United States.
Number 10.
We already said 44% of it goes to ethanol. How much corn do you and I eat? The answer is not much. Where does 90% of the corn go to in this country? Feeding animals in CAFOs, okay, putting chickens in little bins and feeding them, and horses and cows, and lambs and chickens and turkeys, okay? So we, in our unending quest for meat as part of our diet, are taking grains that we used to, again, take for granted. I love this. The price of a bushel of corn in the United States. 2 years ago, it was $1.64 a bushel. $1.64. Today, it is $8.25 this morning. Why? Because of global climate change. Okay? People haven't gotten used to that fact yet. That we had tremendous drought and heat stress, not just drought. When you've got in Kansas 110-degree weather, the crops die. This is going to be the future of agriculture in the temperate regions of our world. And it is places like the United States that for better or for worse is the stopgap for starvation and famine on our planet. We used to feed the world, no longer. The amount of free food that we are going to be able to give away this year is minuscule compared to what it was in the 70s, the 80s, and the 90s, where we had so much food that basically they had to burn a lot of it because of the vermin that would get into it. So the fact simply is that we're in a situation where diseases are going to increase, both biotic and abiotic. Abiotic means non-living, such as heat stroke, okay, such as dehydration. And the biotic, we are going to see the outbreak of diseases with no prevention and no cure that were unheard of in the history of the temperate world, which now, literally in this century, we are going to have to deal with. Any questions out there?
I've got a question, Ralph.
Yes.
And I'm going to play a little devil's advocate.
Play devil.
You're talking about history, and you're talking about since all these things were recorded. Do we know that 1 million years before that, the Earth didn't go the same route?
The answer is, if you remember what I said back at the beginning of the talk, Amnon, we're talking data now.
I understand.
We go back 2.47 million years. I can tell you unequivocally that right now, the carbon dioxide level is the highest and the temperature is the highest on the entire planet in 2.47 million years.
Okay.
Can I say it definitively before that? The answer is not yet, because we haven't gotten the data out of the 3.5-mile deep Vostok ice core yet. So as a scientist, I don't speculate.
Right.
Can I tell you that it gets hotter and colder cyclically on a 150,000-year Milankovitch cycle? That is yes. How bad it's gotten, let's say 5 million, 10 million years ago is what you're asking?
Yeah.
The answer is I don't know.
No, I mean, how do you argue with somebody who's putting this theory down that's saying that it's not a situation where the Earth is going through a 4 million...
Okay. Yes.
You know, I mean, what do you say?
Here's the answer. Actually, there's a very good answer to that, Amnon. It's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it, okay? This goes into some very, very sophisticated science, the science of mass balance equations. We understand how our atmosphere works regarding thermodynamics. It comes back again, that soup analogy I gave you, okay? If the atmosphere has no pollutants in it, it's like chicken broth. When it's loaded up with pollutants, it's like pea soup. It's thick, okay? And heat can't escape from it. That's the analogy. Here is the point, and I said it before. What we have on our planet, if you factor man out of it, is homeostasis on a 150,000-year cycle of going up and down. We have now added, remember, 75 gigatons of carbon to our atmosphere due to us. Okay, oil 3,000 feet down doesn't burn by itself. We pump it up, we put it in our cars, in our industrial plants, and we burn it. That, again, is 2,500 pounds per second on the planet we are adding to the soup. That is the answer to the question. We've done the mass balance equations. How much is stored in the ocean? How much is stored in trees, in forests, in the soil? This is what theoretical ecologists are working with equations all day long. And we've come up with a beautiful model showing, and this is why I said earlier that it's unequivocal. There's nothing to argue about. It's that 75 gigatons that we add in addition to natural cycles of carbon, called the carbon cycle, that has tipped the balance. Okay, there's no published paper on the planet to refute that as of today. if you understand, and I'm not saying this to put down a layperson,
right,
but if you understand the equations that drive these models, we are causing global warming, period. I'm sorry, Republicans out there, okay? Period. Unequivocally, you are wrong. It is not a matter of being politics. Scientifically, it is impossible for CO2 to be as high and or the temperature cycle to have changed as rapidly as it has by natural processes. It can't happen.
Can we go to a couple of the slides?
Yes.
Okay, so like on slide number 20, we have the temperatures have warmed by an average of 2 degrees Celsius during the past 50 years, which is something you said. And has
now,
been...
that's good. Can I talk about that quickly? Okay, this is something that, again, feeds into what Amnon was saying. That's perfect, okay? Past 50 years, it's gone up by 2 degrees Celsius, okay? It is estimated that by 2100, it will go up 6 degrees Celsius. So, again, a layperson says, what's the big deal? If it's 92 outside or if it's 95 outside, it's hot. If it's 19 outside or it's 23 outside, it's cold. Why does that make a difference? Listen carefully. We know definitively that at the depth of the last ice age, 18,000 years ago, you ready? The temperature on our planet was 5.1 degrees Fahrenheit, 3.6 degrees Celsius cooler than it was in 1990. And the Earth was covered with an ice shield. Now we're going the opposite direction. We are taking what was a nice medium temperature for the past 7,000 years. That's the entire development of human civilization and agriculture 7,000 years ago up to the present. And we are shifting it the other direction, in this case, 6 degrees Celsius, 8.4 degrees Fahrenheit. We're doing a giant experiment on our planet. But the difference is, instead of it taking 150,000 years, it'll take less than 100 years. In geological time, that's like a microsecond.
We're speeding up the evolution of our planet.
By orders of magnitude.
Right, and we're seeing a lot of mutations also, and we're also playing around with DNA. I mean, everything on the planet is related. When we hear on the slide, it says that the warming temperature causes all of these cholera outbreaks and Dr. Farnes.
All waterborne diseases are contingent upon two things: the temperature of the water and the amount of nutrients in the water. Okay, so eutrophication it's called. Both of them are going up. You will have more waterborne disease.
More waterborne diseases, which kind of is like an umbrella. Dr. Farsanen on the chat has said the hemorrhagic diseases, Ebola and Marburg and all these others are raging around the world.
That's
we just don't realize it in America. You think that you're protected here, but you are not. It's going to be happening, and you better...
Denial ain't no river in Africa, and we are all still in it.
And we also see the effects on all the other animals and the other plants on the planet. So take a look, at where the migration of animals or the loss of species is going on. We have here we have hordes of stinging yellow jackets in Fairbanks, Alaska, result in deaths. And if you go to the next slide, we're talking about the increase in allergies. So physicians are going to see this starting and ending. It's going to be a longer allergy season for most people as the temperatures warm and there's more mold and growth.
Unfortunately, you're talking about physicians, and I'm not trying to be a blanket. But the fact is that most physicians in the Western world aren't even trained in how to deal with these problems. These are tropical disease problems, which when you learn how to be a doctor in the United States, you don't study.
Hey, Rob, if you don't let her finish what she's saying, there may not be dinner on the table tonight.
Oh, Jesus. Okay. Get back to McDonald's again. Yes.
Okay, so I'm just taking you through some of the slides here. On number 21, I told you about the allergies, and we're seeing this, and people really, they suffer with it, and they have this experience of incapacitation from simple allergies. And think about the increase in mold and spores that are being thrown into the atmosphere, and these can be very, very bad. You know, if that gets in your lungs, you know, you're not able to breathe, and our air is vitally important. Increased amount, okay, so we have also the increase of weeds in the fields growing.
Basically, right now in North America, we have the worst fall allergy season ever recorded. All of the ragweeds, all of the other things that should already be dead from frost, basically are still blooming out there. And we're in the situation where, again, people who suffer from these things are suffering greater and longer. So you're absolutely correct.
Okay, and it says the ragweed is grown in conditions with twice the ambient level of carbon dioxide.
Yes.
The stalks sprout 10% taller than the controls, but produce 60% more pollen. This is Dr. Epstein in 2005 in the New England Journal of Medicine.
Yes.
And increases in not only allergies, but asthma and skin reactions are going to be prevalent. The next slide, people with exercise-induced asthma actually could benefit from warmer weather and humid climate. I have no idea how a person could state that, considering that air pollution is going to make so much asthma.
That's a poor statement. Basically, cold weather is bad for asthmatics, so he's making the statement that as it warms up, they're going to have less of a problem, but as it warms up, you're going to have more air pollution.
Not only air pollution, and I've written extensively about the connection between autism and air pollution. So we've got a lot of things going on because heavy metals are thrown up in the atmosphere. So there's more than just the sulfur dioxide, the methane, and you also have heavy metals. The next slide says on February 12th, the Geophysical Research Letters, Dr. Jacobson wrote that for every 1 degree Celsius rise in global temperatures caused by carbon dioxide, the resulting air pollution would lead to about 1,000 additional deaths and many more cases of respiratory illnesses and asthma. That's just in the United States. What about the rest of the globe? And when there's drought and there's no water and there's no drinking water, it's, you know, you're talking about really major trauma and disasters worldwide.
Well, one of the things that you just mentioned is something we haven't talked about, and, you know, it's one of the really, really nasty things to bring about is that when you're dealing with areas of South America, Central America, Africa, and Asia, 100 years from now, potable water will be one of the most valuable commodities on the planet. Either it won't be there, or it will be so contaminated that it will be unfit for human drinking or health. And a lot of people, you know, they're using a metaphor, but they're basically saying that don't invest in oil, don't invest in gold, invest in water if you want to really talk about how bad things are going to be 100 years from now. Because, again, fresh water is going to be a commodity that will be bought and sold like the most expensive commodities in the world today.
And we'll have to do a whole nother show on plastics because we've got to stop purchasing, well, you know, plastic credit cards. That have been the doom of the society. But
I'm talking about BPA.
That's what I'm talking about. And the bisphosphenol A and the dioxides and all of those other chemicals are hormone disruptors, and they're ruining our population's fertility.
And there's another one that we've been in denial about for 50 years.
We're going to have to talk about that on another show.
The data is unequivocal that all this plastic in our environment is causing
we're going to go to number 26. Okay, on the next slide it says it has been recognized for several decades that the release of chlorofluorocarbons and other atmospheric pollutants depletes the stratospheric ozone, which in turn increases human exposure to ultraviolet radiation, causing skin cancer and cataracts. I mean, we're having all of our organs affected. The next slide.
By the way, CFCs is even more powerful a greenhouse gas than methane. Okay? It's 122 times more powerful a greenhouse gas. So, yeah, I mean, we just continue to release these things because they're convenient and they're cheap, and we want cheap refrigerants without any real understanding of what I was about to say the long-term ramifications are. It's not even the long-term ramifications. It's what's going to happen 10, 20 years from now, meaning most of us. Okay? I mean, a lot of people sort of look at these things, well, I don't care. 100 years from now, I'm dead. I don't really give a darn about what's going to go on. Forget that. That's out the window. We're talking about the lives of young and middle-aged people today being severely affected in the next couple of decades from our treatment of this planet with contempt.
Right. So human exposure to solar ultraviolet radiation has important public health implications. Evidence of harm associated with overexposure to UV has been demonstrated in many studies. Skin cancer and malignant melanoma are among the most severe health effects, but a series of other health effects have been identified. We have skin cancer is caused primarily by the exposure of the UV from the sun, or if you're out there going to a sun lamp, what do they call it?
Crazy.
Salon.
You're crazy.
You're drying out your skin, and you're going to have skin cancer down the line in a number of years. So globally,
there's talk about banning it because it should have been banned decades ago, but it's absolutely ridiculous.
I mean, you think about if for people who have eczema and psoriasis, you want to get out in the sun because it seems to improve their condition. But in the situation that we are in, we have to be very careful about the time of day that you go out there, and you don't realize it. Everybody has been, if you've been to the beach or outside when it's overcast and cloudy, and you don't think that you're getting the sunburn. And what happens? Those rays are going right through the atmosphere, whether you realize it or not. So you don't want to end up to look like a lobster. It says globally in the year 2000, over 200,000 cases of melanoma were diagnosed. There were 65,000 melanoma-associated deaths. So this is not just disease. We're talking about
From 1950 to the year 2000, malignant melanoma went up by 5,000% in the United States. Okay? Why? Because of what we did to the atmosphere. Period. People used to be outside 100 years ago a hell of a lot more than they are today.
Absolutely.
Yet we are dying from melanoma because of what we did to the atmosphere.
And if you're concerned about your children and your grandchildren and any further generations, and you're going to look at them and you're going to see they may be dying before you are, and they're suffering from all of these diseases, whether it's ADHD, autism, asthma is increasingly on the rise, all the respiratory diseases. Can you imagine a child with skin cancer? You see leukemia, you see cancers in little children. This is crazy. And it's because of pollutions, of not taking care of ourselves and not taking care of the planet. So, I know the show is about health effects, and we need to seek answers, but we need to seek answers about being politically active, legislatively active, so that we can change the rules. I'm out there talking about fracking because I don't want the emissions of gas and the pollution of and contamination of the water that people are turning on the tap, and it's lighting it up into a flame of fire. It's causing earthquakes. The earth is rumbling. The earth is groaning and crying under our feet. So take a look at each of us. We can't solve the world's problems, but we can do something for ourselves, for our family members, to talk about it with our friends. Worldwide.
One of the things that I just want to, before we're finished here, I just found a chart from a book I'm writing on this thing, dealing with cereal production, world cereal production. And, of course, cereals, basically you're talking about rice, wheat, and corn, comprising over 92% of human diets around the world. And you take a look at these projected charts for the year 2100, and you look at the central United States, the breadbasket, down 76%. You take a look at sub-Saharan Africa, down 88%. You take a look at Australia, which is a major grain-producing area, down 73%. China, down 59%. India, okay, with their population stress, down 82%, except in the furthest northern regions of the country. The entire breadbasket of India is dark brown on this chart. These are things that people are that's going to wake people up. This isn't happening all of a sudden. But as this temperature change, as these precipitation changes begin to manifest itself, and when people realize, particularly in developing countries, that more and more of their income is going simply to being able to survive and to buy food, maybe that will wake the world up to realizing that we've got to start turning this thing around, because at some point, folks, we are going to throw that last straw on the camel that's going to break its back. And you think what happened in World War II or the Holocaust or Pol Pot in Cambodia was something. We're talking about the potential deaths over short periods of time of literally hundreds of millions of people in some very, very ugly ways, from disease, famine, and the kinds of things that go with it. Not funny. It's not funny, and we're not talking about 200 or 500 or 1,000 years from now. As Debbie just said, we're talking about our children and our grandchildren. And guess what? We're the adults, and we're supposed to be the mature ones that try to deal with this. We can't expect kids to deal with it right now. But look at the legacy that we are about to leave to our posterity, the future inhabitants of this planet. Look at what we're putting them in a situation where God helped them in terms of being able to simply deal with the mess that we left behind for them.
We have to create these think tanks because this is the gift
we have
that
to commit to doing something.
I wanted to mention here finishing up on these last slides that 18 million people are blind as a result of cataracts. Of these
That's from UV. Yep.
From UV. Of these, 5% of all cataracts-related disease burden directly to UV.
Correct.
Sun protection is recommended, and we know if you're in the alternative field, you know the SPVs, the sun protectant, are cancer-causing. So what do you do?
Yeah. So what are you supposed to do?
So you need to wear clothes, wear a hat,
exactly.
wear a brim. Don't go out in the worst time of day. If you're in construction and you're out there, you have no way out because this is your work environment. So how are we going to care for these people? What are the solutions going to be? I wanted to go down a little bit if we have further slides. Okay, one more slide on number 30 is preventing vitamin D deficiency. This is a big one. And people are going to start to learn that while protection against overexposure to UV radiation is a main health concern, UV in small amounts is essential to good health as it leads to the production of vitamin D in the body. Right. And vitamin D strengthens the bones and the musculoskeletal system. People who have low sun exposure, such as those in institutional care or are housebound, people with deeply pigmented skin, living in high altitudes, or for religious or cultural reasons who cover up their entire body surface, they're going to need either supplementation or find a way to get out for just 15, 20 minutes of sun each day. I'm going to just pop up there these quick slides. Dr. Bob, I don't know whether you can see them or not. It's slide number 31, and it's just showing the pollutants in the air that we've got carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and the description of what those gases are, the sources where they come from in the environment and from our manufacturing plants, the health effects, which are...
Yeah, these are known as the criteria, or primary pollutants. We've known about them for a long time. Yet, in order to be able to produce the industrial world that we want, we keep on emitting them. The technology is there to clean most of them up, but technology costs money. And you say to the power plant, we don't want you... I mean, do you understand that one of the big things we talk about in our food and water is mercury? 100% of the mercury in our food and water and our fish and everything else comes from coal-burning power plants. We can eliminate mercury from coal-burning power plants, but it costs money. And people say, we don't want to pay for that, so instead you get cancer.
We're putting the mercury into our vaccines instead, and we're just shooting them up into our body instead. So on slide number 33, we've also got lead, plumbum. We know this is a very toxic heavy metal. We're also putting aluminum into our vaccines, which are also neurotoxin.
We put it into our food.
And into our food, yeah, when we cook on aluminum pans.
Right, on aluminum pans.
You don't want to be doing that. So what can it can result in anemia, high blood pressure, brain and kidney damage, neurological disorders,
and right now
cancer.
We find that any canned food or any plastic bottle that we get our food from or water from is laden with BPA. And everybody said, there's no big deal. And now we're finding about 50 different diseases that are manifested. And the worst of all is in children, okay? Basically, you want to have grandkids, well, you better think again, because women and men are going to be sterile and or have cancer of their reproductive organs due to these plastic compounds that we put in our food. People in Europe, people in Canada have banned it. They said no. In the United States, there isn't even the thought of banning it because it's a $7 billion a year industry producing these plastics that go into our food supply. Does everything come down to the almighty dollar? Well,
yes.
The answer on that one's yes.
Yes, that is the answer. We can't help ourselves. I mean, I recently heard a study that asked if you would buy made in America or you would buy something from outside of America. You know, you have pride in your work and in your workmanship.
If it's cheaper from somewhere else, I'm going to buy it from there.
Yeah, even though on a survey they might say, yes, I'm buying made in America. In actuality, when they come to the bottom line, they don't do it. And so that means that people have to look into themselves and ask them, what are their choices? Are they going to buy local? Are they going to help their region? Are they going to think about their neighbor? Are they going to learn to barter? What are they going to do to reduce all of these emissions and the cost to our environment? I have that little slide up. Okay, so, wow. Slide number 36 is telling us about the acid deposition, the causes to our soil and our water, acidifying everything in our environment.
I might know something about that.
That is your specialty for the last 33 years. It speeds up the decay of buildings, statues, sculptures, everything. What is it doing to us? You know, we're a part of the planet too.
It leaches aluminum into the water supply daily.
And, we didn't even talk about the ocean, the fish kills and the algae blooms. And, I mean, there's no getting away from it. You can't miss it. It's all around us. Okay.
One of the things that's very important to understand, just to end this, because this was in the Times last week and published in Nature last week, is think about this. Put your thinking hats on. All of the glaciers and the ice shelves are melting. That's made out of fresh water.
Yep.
All of that fresh water is going into the oceans, okay? The pH of fresh water is 5.5. The pH of the oceans is 8.9. That means all of that fresh water is acidifying the oceans of the earth, which is preventing calcium and magnesium, known as aragonite, to be taken into shellfish, such as krill and other mollusks and clams and the shells that we see. And their shells are now becoming malformed, or the organisms can't form the shells. This is like science fiction, except guess what? Last week it was published in Science, the journal. It's happening. They're measuring it right now. The shellfish, the mollusks, and the crustaceans in the oceans cannot make their exoskeletons. This is the food chain that supplies. Think of whales, baleen whales, get 99% of their nutrition from these organisms that are about to go extinct because they can't form their exoskeletons today. That's not in the future. It's happening right now. As I said, most climate scientists are literally beside themselves because they can't believe. I speak to them all the time out in Colorado. Some of my PhD students work out there right now, and they say every day when the new data comes in regarding the oceans, regarding methane evolution in the tundra, all they can do is shake their heads and say, my God, we did not expect this to happen, and it is happening right now.
It's human.
That perhaps is one of the most frightening elements of what is going on, okay? I'm going to be blunt, okay, about something that a lot of people don't say. I shouldn't say it, but I have to be honest as a scientist. Regarding a lot of the things we talked about, folks, the horse is out of the barn. It's too late, okay? You are not going to turn some of these things around. Others, you can. But when you talk about the acidification of the whole frigging ocean, 73% of our planet, that does not turn around simply by turning your lights off or buying a Toyota Prius, okay? This would take global shifts in the way we deal with our environment, in which most pundits would tell you ain't about to happen. We're going the opposite direction. Frack, baby, frack. We need more fossil fuel. I don't hear anybody saying, I think we ought to put the price of gasoline up to $10 so people stop driving so we don't emit these things anymore. Anybody who said that would probably have a bullet in their head in about 5 minutes.
It's human nature, Dr. Bob. This is human nature, to prolong and deny and put it off to as long as you possibly can until it hits you in the face. Even in our individual lives, we go along doing things until God says, okay, you get a diagnosis, you have a car accident, something happens, and some switch in your body changes, and you can't look the other way anymore.
Most people, from the statement I just made, we're changing the chemistry and the biology of the ocean. And most people honestly would look at you and say, yeah, so what? They don't understand. We live in a closed system that every organism on the planet shares a role. It has a role in what is going on. And unless we are in the situation of being able to first understand it and then do something about it, somebody is going to pay the price. That's perhaps the scariest part of this entire thing.
Right.
This is not a freebie. Somebody is going to suffer due to the iniquity that we basically show right now.
Dr. Sharma, you have been listening patiently, and I want to tell you that just having you here, just your presence and energy, adds to the show, adds to the fact that people are coming in to listen and learn and take this
I want to compliment the Indians. I read an awful lot about the Indian technology that's going on with solar in particular. I'll be honest, they're ahead of us.
Oh, everybody's ahead of us.
They understand full well what I'm talking about. And with their huge population to protect, they can't afford for this stuff to go on, yet we in the United States sort of shrug our shoulders and look the other way.
Yes, but what I am thinking, sir,
Yes.
what Dr. Hahnemann thoughts about his future at that time. He proved all the minerals, those are polluting the earth nowadays. He
Yes.
proved the silica, he proved, and many minerals, they are hurting us nowadays. So this is the only homeopathy that can cure this condition, even for the earth. But
Yep.
we are hurting our earth.
Right. So you're saying that our hope is in homeopathy, but we also must remember that Hahnemann gave us the living conditions. We must clean up the living conditions. If you live with a moldy basement, if you don't do well in a humid environment, obstacles to cure is number one. And I tell folks, if you go to sleep and your pillow is a rock and you wake up with a headache every day, you've got to change your pillow. You can't just expect your headache to go away because you're living, I should say, under a rock, but with your head on a rock, So we must clean up. This is all the people who are into uncluttering their lives and uncluttering their homes and organizational skills. Why are we so obsessed with this? We're obsessed because we see a chaotic world. We see all of this stuff around us totally out of control. And again, it's up to us as individuals to do something, even though it seems that impossible. So, Dr.
Better not
Bob,
be impossible.
Yeah, so Dr. Bob, do you have any glimmer of hope, any little...
Yeah, I do. And as I said, I began this talk by talking about what I'll almost call the tragic miracle of this past summer, okay? Basically, people, there are a lot of skeptics out there. There are a lot of people that either are skeptical because of their politics or because they're ignorant. I see that, at least in this country, beginning to turn around now, more so than, I've been in this field for 30 years. More so than any other time in my career, I see people waking up. I get more and more questions about what can we do about these problems, okay, looking for answers. The enrollment in my courses by young people keeps on going through the roof. They want to learn about what's going on. I consider this to be a positive motion, okay? Without education, without people understanding why they should care, that is where you draw the line. Then there's no hope. If I have no understanding of what's going on, then why should I care about it? And particularly, why should I do something about it? So I see things beginning to turn around. And, are we there? Not even close. But compared to 3, 4, 5 years ago, we've come orders of magnitude ahead in people recognizing that we have a real problem out there. I dare say it's going to take more Hurricane Sandys for people to really get jumped off their seats. When they lose their possessions, when people die, that wakes people up. It's sad. You mentioned the words human nature before.
Yeah.
It's sad that that's the way it has to be. But this summer, with the Northwest Passage being open, with the complete dissolution of the Arctic ice sheets, with the beginning of the melting of Greenland, with the pH of the oceans changing, with severe hurricanes and typhoons in the Atlantic and the Pacific Basin, people are beginning to scratch their heads and say, maybe this is real, and maybe we better wake up about it.
So I think that in opposition to the negative human qualities of things like greed and evil, it is going to be the forces of good, the human characteristics of compassion, in such that we saw the Occupy Wall Street people running over to the folks from Far Rockaway in New York, who were the ones. It's the people energy that are going out and making sandwiches and bringing them hot cups of coffee and bringing them clothing and tents and caring for people who were totally displaced. It's us. That's the answer, us. We really can't depend upon government and to do everything for us, and that's where it's going to end up.
I think you hit the magic button. Is that basically if every individual on the planet even did something small to try to move it in the right direction, I think you would see movement. But until individuals come to reckon that they are part of the problem, we are all guilty. Every one of us listening to this show are guilty. We're all part of the problem. Hence, just as simply, we could become part of the solution.
That's a beautiful ending. I love that. We can be we can be part of the solution. So we went time over. I want to thank Amnon. He was just totally immersed in the discussion here, and lots of big smiles from him. Thank you, Dr. Deepak, for bringing your energy from Asia over here to this important show. I saw on the chat that some of the folks said, please share it on Facebook. These are all archived. Anybody at any time at their convenience can watch the show. They can show it to their children. They can even show it, say, there's this great show, and tell the kids that their teachers at school that they can show it. If anybody wants to contact Dr. Bob, he's usually available.
Usually.
Yes.
Yes.
Usually. Let's make an appointment for some time in the future. I really think, particularly regarding homeopathy, that we need to talk about this plastics and environmental hormones question. That's something that is, again, very critical.
Okay.
Again, not something in the future. It's happening right now, and people need to be informed about it.
Okay, and also I would like to have Dr. Hoekstra back again. He was the person who helped us with the thermoscan, the thermographs, and what we do to detect radiation effects upon our body or cancer growths and tumors. And he's got important information about the effects of Fukushima around the world and the fact that they've had more earthquakes and tsunamis, and the radiation is just being disseminated into the oceans and into the air. So this is another component we didn't even touch upon. Next week, we have Dr. Isaac Golden coming in from Australia to talk about homeoprophylaxis, and multi-millions of doses of homeopathic therapy has been given out and protected a whole country from disease, from
that's a good time of year to talk about
epidemic
it with the flu
disease.
going around.
Well, we have the flu, but there's also what happens when the earth warms, the mosquitoes, and the humid climates proliferate the growth of all of not only the mold, but the insects that carry the parasites. So we have that issue, and we are going to have Janie Goddard, is that her name, from England. She's going to talk about mind-body medicine because she is recently gone to a revolutionary workshop conference. And we have lots of people coming onto the show. If you have people you would like to have speak, give us a call. Let us know. We've got so many wonderful programs coming up. And if you want to hear more about homeopathy, you know where to go. Homeopathy World Community on Facebook. Thousands of articles. We have wonderful, wonderful homeopathic doctors around the world who are doing their best. Give them a call. Okay. Ask Amnon. He's my cheerleading team. I'll tell you he is. He tells everybody about homeopathy. And he also says, Debbie, you must tell everybody about taking something for preventative of flu, influenzinum or acylcoccinum, or initiation of what happens at the very onset of flu. So like aconite for anxiety. Dr. Deepak Sharma, you're good at influenza remedies. Throw a couple of out to the crowd.
Yes, then there are too many remedies for that.
Too many to mention.
What's the best preventative? Best preventative.
Good health. Your immune system.
Yes, and then the best is echinacea.
Echinacea?
Brainia. Yeah. Echinacea, Brainia, and arsenicum. These are the great ones.
Okay, and arsenicum. Yeah. Okay, so arsenicum, if you have restlessness, anxiety, you want small sips of water, you've got maybe even diarrhea. What about a fever? Things like that. So
Yeah.
you can go to Homeopathy World Community, do a little search. I know we have tons and tons of pages concerning flu and flu remedies. Nux vomica. Hey, that's a great one. So we're going to have to do another show about flu again, I guess. Right?
Eupitorium perforatum is also good.
Which one?
Eupitorium perforatum.
Absolutely. Eupitorium, if you have those aching bone pains.
Bones. Yep.
Crushing and breaking bones, it feels like. Go back to the last show with Miranda Castro. She talked about cell salts, the little sweet, gentle remedy, she calls them. She's so sweet herself, and that has a lot of potency and power in them. And you can get all of the homeopathic remedies over the counter at the local stores. Remember, our shows are purely educational. If you need medical help, see your healthcare practitioner. I think we're ready to go. We have more?
I think we're ready. Have a good day, everybody.
Oh, yes. Thank you,
Sir.
Dr. Bob.
Thank you,
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
We love you, everyone.
Thank you, Debbie.
Okay. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
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 You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Sundays 9 a.m. to noon. Health In with Debby Bruck, Mondays 11 a.m. to noon. The Scope of Things with Marilyn Shannon, Mondays 7 to 8 p.m. Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Mondays 8 to 9 p.m. Body Talk with Cindy Prince, first Tuesdays 8 to 9 p.m. Reawaken Your Brilliance with Julie Seibert. And too late, you can always watch